Hi there, John Florez again with part 3 of the great arrangers I worked with in my years in the music business. This is kind of a potpourri of several composers, as chronologically as I can do it. I put on this stupid presentation in 1970 that was full orchestra, and I invited the whole record industry to it. We sent out invitations. Everybody came. We catered it from Villa Capri restaurant in Hollywood. And had I known better, I was hot at the time, and I just could have gone through an attorney or a manager / agent, something like that, and gotten deals without having to spend my own money for a full orchestra extravaganza at RCA's Music Center of the World in Hollywood. Oh well. I had 3 acts and 3 composers, and the first act was Five Flights Up, arranged by Ernie Freeman, whom I had never worked with before. Ernie was famous for decades as a player and then an arranger, a gentleman, just a delight to work with. I would say a difference between him and some of the other arrangers I worked with is that he tended to voice things a little bit lower, both strings and brass, than the other guys, and in retrospect, I really like that. So the first arrangement he did for me was with Five Flights Up and their hit record, Do What You Want to Do. I'll play an excerpt of that.
You walk around so fancy free, giving your number to whoever you please. And when they call, you walk into the door, saying, honey, it's only a friend. So you just do what you want.
The funny thing about this is that Five Flights Up performed this song full orchestra for the industry, and my lawyer blew the deal that we had. I think it was pending with Curb, which would have been sensational. I should have, in my opinion, done a whole bunch of work for Curb, but I never met Mike Curb the entire time I was in the music business. Go figure. He was interested in Five Flights Up, but the deal was kind of botched by my attorney at the time. So Eddie Rosenblatt, who was head of promotion and sales for a new label, Talent Associates Records, heard Five Flights Up perform Do What You Want to Do in Carol's in my living room, sitting on the sofa, hearing them sing it a cappella after we had just done it full orchestra several weeks prior. So that's the story on Do What You Want to Do. The next thing that happened is that my new attorney at the time, not the one who botched the deal earlier, Jay Cooper, called and asked me if I wanted to do a group called Sisters Love. And they were at A&M, and boy were they good. Also included Mary Clayton, who would become a solo artist on her own. So I'll play you a little bit of Sisters Love's I Just Want to Be Me, with perhaps the most exciting, in fact, absolutely the most exciting vocal performance I had ever produced is the wrong word. I didn't do a thing. The tracks, which Ernie is responsible for, and the drummer, Johnny Guthrie, my lifelong friend, who did a sensational, exciting job on the track, that's fine, but I didn't produce this lead vocal that is so stunning. She just did it. And actually collapsed after the performance. I don't mean like medical emergency collapsed, but totally ran out of gas and just kind of fell to the floor. And we had a standing ovation for her in the control room at the time for what is still the finest performance I've ever, quote, produced, that I didn't really produce. She did it all on her own. So here's a bit of I Just Want to Be Me by Sisters Love. So next up is Steve Forman. Now, Steve Forman, boy, is there a story regarding him. First, he took Johnny Guthrie's place in my band in college as the drummer for a group originally called the Fern Ducks, of all things, and later the Afterglows, and Steve was our drummer. He did a couple charts for me in Arizona when I was first learning how to produce, and when I went to LA to produce for RCA and then go independent, I called him over and asked whether he'd like to do a couple acts for me there. One of which was a session on Five Flights Up. It was their third single called Like Monday Follows Sunday. Here's an excerpt of that.
If someone asks me what eternity is, I'd say it's you, girl. You, girl. 'Cause you're my rock of ages. And if someone asks me where reality lives, I'd say in you, girl. In you, girl. 'Cause I can read the pages of your mind, and I could get to love the sound of little children's laughter all around. Like Monday follows Sunday, I'm gonna love you not for one day, but forever.
During the same period of time, Steve arranged a cut for me with Linda Seals, which was a remake of Angel of the Morning. And he did a sensational job of this. I'd like to show you just a brief moment of that. Here's Linda Seals with Angel of the Morning.
I'm old enough to face the dawn. Just call me angel of the morning, angel. Just touch my cheek before you leave me, baby. Just call me angel of the morning, angel. Then slowly turn away from me.
Okay, wrapping up with Steve Forman, Steve went on to become Jim Messina's percussionist for quite some time, and then created a multi-decade career for himself as an arranger, composer, and percussionist for mostly films. He has, in fact, a huge warehouse or a group of warehouses where he has all of these instruments that he invented for film work. If there wasn't a sound available for what he conceived for the film, he invented them, and he invented lots of them. He then went on to teach at Oxford and England, etc. He became a legend, and deservedly so. Thank you, Steve, for your wonderful work for me and for your career that we all so admire. Next on the list is Gene Page. Gene Page was known at the time in LA for orchestrating Diana Ross and then Barry White. I really wanted to work with Gene, so I gave him the first date on the Hughes Corporation once the Hughes Corporation was signed. I wanted his masterful orchestrations on Freedom for the Stallion, which was an Alan Toussaint tune that was the Hughes Corporation's first single. Here's a brief excerpt of that.
They got men making laws that destroy other men. Big money, God, it's a doggone sin. I know. You got to help us find a way. Freedom for the stallion. Freedom for the mare and the colt. Freedom for the baby child. Ooh,
Freedom for the Stallion charted decently, but would have charted great if RCA knew how to cross it over from pop into R&B, which it didn't know how to do at the time. When Rock the Boat went #1 on the Hughes Corporation, all the promotion tip sheets at the time were saying, re-release Freedom for the Stallion because now black radio's starting to play it. The very record that was our first record that black radio wouldn't play. I used my own money. I flew to New York and begged Tom Draper to re-release Freedom for the Stallion instead of a Rock the Boat sound-alike, which is what, of course, the label wanted me to produce. Well, Tom turned down my advice, and I quit producing the group. I didn't want to make more cute, catchy, sound-alike records, and I knew we had a hit if Freedom for the Stallion was re-released. So the Hughes Corporation and I went our separate ways after this masterful job that Gene Page did with Freedom for the Stallion. He also did another couple of cuts on the album. One is Off My Cloud, featuring Ann Kelly with the Hughes Corporation, and All Going Down Together, a Michael Jarrett tune that he did a wonderful job on as well. Here are excerpts of both of those.
You're the one. You are the one. Ooh, you brought the sun. Brought the sun. And boy, you shine really high to win the night. Here I am on my climb down to it with you, boy. Sitting on a telephone pole, looking for a place to fly. There's a young man sitting in a puddle of mud, preparing himself to die. We're happy, we're going down together. We're
Last but not least, Gene did a movie soundtrack song for me with Renee Armand, a song she wrote called I Can't See You Anymore. And this was purposely designated not to be a hit single, but to be a song from the Natalie Wood movie called The Affair. And Gene did this incredible orchestral job on this. I'd like you to hear it.
I keep telling myself I'm not a kid anymore. You're the one who took the sun and made it beautiful. I never saw the sun before. Now I can't see you anymore.
The interesting thing that Gene told me is he said, John, you're the only one who really wants me to write big, flowing, dramatic strings. Most everybody kind of just wants the strings to melt into the background tracks, the rhythm tracks. You allow me to do something that most of the other producers don't let me do. Good news about that is that we had wonderful results. The bad news about that is that I got into this habit of wanting these big flowing strings on everything, and as I've mentioned before, I'd like to take that back and do it over again. Not the stuff Gene did, but the requests I made of other arrangers to do these overly pop strings that didn't convert well to R&B airplay. Okay, that's it for Gene Page. chronologically this doesn't work because we're jumping to 1979. But I had been asked to do a Frida Payne album, and the first arranger we hired, I will not mention his name, went way over budget on our first tracks, and I had to stop that, and Frida was not happy either. And Frida told me, I have this great guy, he's a new arranger in town called Bruce Miller. I think you're going to like his work. He's dependable, he's fast, and he's creative. Well, boy, was he ever. Now, Bruce is one of the few people in my life to have a 40-year career as an arranger-conductor. Just look him up. Bruce Miller, he's a legend now. Records, film, you name it, he's done it all, and he's a master. The interesting thing about playing you just one partial cut of Bruce's work is that the executive who mixed the album, I did not mix it. These mixes have the orchestra buried. It blew my mind. In fact, Bruce called me after hearing it and said, John, you want to go drink some tequila? This is unlistenable. And I said, I know. I had called Cecil when I heard it and said, please don't send this to the presses. Let's give the mixes another shot. And he said, John, it's already gone to press. It's done. So I don't have a nice compilation of the stuff we did together because if I played it for you, you wouldn't hear much of the orchestra. It's so buried. The only person who has a cut of what the orchestrations really sounded like is Frida Payne. Many years ago, I sent her a tape of the rough mixes that were done the final night of vocals before handing the tapes over to Cecil Hale to mix. If I had those rough mixes from the night before, I would love to play them for you because Bruce's work was probably the most creative that I had experienced since Ray Cork, my first project for RCA with Friends of Distinction's Grayson album. Bruce could write stock, but Bruce could also write, just as they say, out of the box. You never knew what was coming next. It was dramatic, it was intricate, it was challenging, and it was fun. And kudos to Bruce Miller for his 4-decade career. We all love you, Bruce, and we admire the work you've done.
Something for you, here it is. Ooh. crowd. I know somehow I've got to have you dance with me. I'm all alone. I'll take you home tonight, my love. Yeah. Loving you's as good as looking at you. All I wanna do is make it with you.
Let's tack on one more arranger, which was at the very, very end of my musical career, and it was in Nashville. It goes without saying that Bergen White is probably the most famous arranger of country music ever. And Bergen did some tracks for me. I'll show you a couple of excerpts. And Bergen's work, I think, most parallels Perry Botkin's. They both have the same kind of work ethic. They both wrote quickly and well, and when you came into the studio, things were done in a really efficient way and with very, very good taste. I admire Bergen, and I love the vast array of work that he's done for decades.
She gives me all her love so tenderly. She's nothing special to you, but she's everything to me.
Well, thanks for watching. That's a wrap-up of several composers. And now we'll go on and do a special episode about my best friend, deceased friend, Darnielle Pershing, who was the light of my life for several years. Nobody could make me laugh harder, pull more shenanigans, nor do such sensational work, and have more fun than we had for the several years that we worked together as best friends and producer-arranger. That's up next. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.